Apprenons l'anglais en contexte.
Jason, welcome to what I call the chat room.
Thanks for inviting me.
Just now, you told me that you didn't like the weather. Kind of surprising.
C'est plutôt surprenant.
Kind of surprising. Is it too cold?
It's in between.
C'est entre les deux.
It's in between.
I'm saying this because I thought maybe the Spanish winter would feel like summer for a Canadian, right?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of misconceptions.
Misconceptions. Confusion.
It's a lot of misconceptions about Canada, right? I mean, we're originally from the West Coast, which is on the coast with like California and Washington, Seattle, and it's kind of warmed by the water.
En quelque sorte, réchauffé par l'eau.
And it's kind of warmed by the water. You know, the weather's changed a lot around the world. When I grew up, it was very rare to get snow on the West Coast, maybe once every 4 years. But now we're seeing a lot more forest fires in the summer.
Wow.
And we're even seeing snow every year. So, like, for me right now, this kind of overcast gray weather.
Ce type de temps gris et couvert.
For me right now, this kind of overcast gray weather would be pretty normal. Or a little bit warmer or a little bit colder.
You've been traveling for 20 years.
Yeah.
How did it come about?
Comment cela s'est-il produit?
How did it come about?
I was thinking about that. So I was looking at my notes here because I'm getting old. Probably more than 20 years, probably like 30 years. I think my first trip was, it was after high school. How did it come about? When I grew up, I grew up in a neighborhood and I was quite fortunate, basically middle class in Canada. It's quite a diverse neighborhood, a lot of different cultures. Canada at that time, I think, was also quite open to the world, quite involved internationally. So, I mean, I think there was a big kind of international influence growing up. Obviously not a massively cosmopolitan place like, a Paris or something or Barcelona, but still quite cosmopolitan and international considering size. I grew up in probably a smallish medium place called Victoria, British Columbia.
Yeah,
which is
I
off
know.
the coast of Vancouver. And so, and even education was fairly international. So, and I'm fortunate that my parents had done a bit of traveling, not a lot, right? So I think I'm thankful for them for instilling some of that in me.
To instill, inculquer, transmettre.
So I think I'm thankful for them for instilling some of that in me. Reading, thinking of all these places,
Right.
That you could go. So, yeah. And then obviously being fortunate enough to have the opportunity.
Right. Did you have your first solo trip in high school?
Solo trip. Voyage en solo.
Did you have your first solo trip in high school?
I'm trying to think because I may have done some road trips.
Road trip. Voyage en voiture.
I may have done some road trips before that.
Okay.
Like down to the States with friends. But yeah, that would be the first.
Among others, was that solo trip to Turkey? How special was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't realize the impact or how special things are until afterwards, right?
Ce n'est qu'après coup qu'on se rend compte à quel point les choses sont spéciales.
I mean, I think you don't realize the impact or how special things are until afterwards, right? I mean, it was actually a package tour.
Un voyage organisé.
It was actually a package tour because the reason that I chose Turkey is I was interested in the classics in Greek and Roman history.
Right.
And it's actually where I ended up going into university. And obviously Turkey is the cradle of a lot of that. Right?
Cradle. Berceau.
Obviously Turkey is the cradle of a lot of that, right? So it was a package tour booked through a travel agency, a mall, right? Not pre-internet, but pre a lot of the stuff that we have now. And I think that I saw that, and probably my parents saw that as a safe option for a solo trip, right? Traveling with a group. And I'm not going to say that any way to travel is better than another, but it was probably pretty safe. It's kind of funny because it was actually, I think, one of these like gap year.
Année sabbatique.
One of these like gap year, university, high school kid trips. So not so common in Canada, but I know in a lot of countries, kids take a trip before going to university.
Right.
So it was actually a lot of like under 30-year-olds, a lot of like Americans. And so being quite an introvert myself, and being Canadian and not American, and actually on the younger edge
L'un des plus jeunes.
of the kids on the trip. I think I probably missed out.
J'ai certainement raté quelque chose.
I probably missed out and didn't really see the whole point of the trip because I was really there to see the sights. So I don't think I probably had as much fun as a lot of other people did. But nevertheless, it was an amazing trip. The crazy thing about that trip is the two things that I remember is just the street touts.
Les vendeurs ambulants.
The street touts in Istanbul and around, right? And as somebody from Canada, that made me really uncomfortable and not like the place at all. And again, I know it's a cultural thing. It's in lots of other cities, but I try to avoid that now because although I understand the place and why it's there, you still like to comfortable, right? And funnily enough, the other thing, and this speaks to my age, is that I think I had a cassette recorder on the trip.
Oh, really?
And this is one of the things that I remember. And even at that time, a cassette recorder would have been a little bit old, right? Like I had a CD, a Walkman as well, right? That played CDs. Even had a freaking mini disc player at one point. But I think the thing that I remember is that I had two cassettes that I listened to a lot on that trip, just because I was quite introverted, so I wasn't socializing so much. And one was like Yes, Close to the Edge, which is an old progressive rock band. And the other one was Los Lobos, which was like a band from California, kind of like X-Max music.
Xmas est un synonyme de Christmas, la Noël.
X-Max music. But I, oddly enough, remember that and sort of my comfort more than a lot of things about the trip.
J'ai conçu un outil de pratique qui vous permettra d'être en contact au quotidien avec la langue anglaise. Vous aurez l'occasion de vous enregistrer, d'écouter votre voix, mais aussi d'obtenir un feedback, des corrections, tantôt au niveau de la grammaire que du vocabulaire, des activités de listening bien structurées et départagées en fonction des niveaux. Tout cela en plus des séances interactives en direct que vous aurez avec moi à travers la pratique de l'oral et l'écoute constante. Vous pourrez réaliser enfin ce rêve longtemps nourri de passer à un niveau supérieur de fluidité en anglais. Je vous laisse tous les détails en description et en commentaire. Let's get into it.